if the older dads can connect with the younger dads and to really begin to build bridges, but understanding this, the younger needs the older for wisdom because they have the experience. But in the case of when Paul's writing to Timothy in 1 Timothy chapter 4, where he says, let no one look down on your youthfulness, right? But instead be an example to all those who believe in speech, love, faith, conduct, and purity. There are things that the younger generation, I think, could also impart to the older generation. And I don't think a lot of churches understand how big of a divide it's brewing. And I wish that they would put their hands around both the old and the young and say, y'all got to wear the same t-shirt of fatherhood here, okay? We got to figure this thing out.
Amen. Welcome to the Faithful Fathering Podcast. This is Rick Wirtz, and I'm blessed to be here in the studio with a father-son A-team. Mr. George Washington and his son Jordan are here with us, and we're talking about Father's Day month. That's the theme for this podcast series. And in this segment, we're going to be talking about fathers as a force in the church. You know, are fathers a force in your church? There was a 1850, the statement goes that as fathers go, the church goes, as the church goes, society goes, as society goes, the nation goes. But there's an English theologian by the name of Richard Baxter that in the 1650s, actually charged a group of pastors saying, make sure to attend to the training and resourcing heads of households. It will multiply efforts more than anything else you can do. Invest in the training and resources of heads of households. That's what faithful fathering is all about, is encouraging and equipping dads to be the dads the next generation needs. So in this segment, we're going to just talk a little bit about how the church is doing on that front. I know when I talk to pastors a lot of times, I'll just say, hey, what are you doing for dads? And, well, nothing specifically, right? And there are a lot of things going on for moms and kids and teenagers and youth and what have you, but nothing specifically for dads. So one of the questions is, there is an official survey I've done at churches that have 10 questions on a scale of 1 to 10. This is not church bashing. It's simply a church calibration, if you will, on where we're at. But, what is, in your experience, what's the level of awareness to the importance of fathers in the churches that you've participated in?
Yeah, so I feel that with where we are currently, I would say moderate level. And moderation means that I think people are aware that it's an issue. I think the challenge, though, is that people underestimate the severity, right? And because they underestimate maybe the severity, there's a lack of urgency. So I think that could probably explain some of the differences in a programming perspective, like you were just introducing regarding, mothers or children or, any other subgroup. But as you and I both know, and I know my dad agrees with this, that fathers are critically important, not just to the vitality of the household, but also to the church itself.
Any thoughts, George, on your experience? Did the church come beside you when you moved to Houston to say, hey, we're here to help and encourage you as a dad?
Yes, I would say they did. They had programs set up for men as well as the leaders. They gave you the opportunity to be a part of the program so you can just be accounted for. Accountability was so key when I was at the church because they were saying that in order to be a leader, you have to be present.
You have to show up.
You have to show up. You have to show up, And I like what you were saying about the role as the leader of the home. That speaks volume. I say, because once the father steps away from the home, I think you give room for the enemy to come in, and he coming in at attack. In order for a man to show his young boys in the home how to become men, he has to be present.
Right. You don't want to leave that door open for somebody else. What is it they say when you cast the demons out? If you don't fill it with something, they'll come back sevenfold. Right. That's what we have to watch out for. And I think that certainly dads have to be present and accounted for. The only, I always say, have you found, and it's been my experience, men will be accountable to each other for lies. They won't necessarily be vulnerable. That's kind of, I've been calling them vulnerability groups these days. But how about just in general, of 10 sermons, how many sermons actually address fathering, or is a pastor talking to fathers in particular? Do you have any gut feel? One out of 10, 5 out of 10, last 10 sermons?
In my experience, or just generally speaking?
Just generally speaking, and I mean, tied to your experience, certainly.
Yeah, so I'd venture to say that not many. I couldn't put a number on it, but what I would say is typically when I've seen fathers addressed, outside of, once again, that Father's Day sermon that you already said in the previous section here, is fathers are merely an application point. So this is maybe a pastor's expositing a text, and then he gives a blurb about, okay, this is how it looks like for a father. My personal preference is that we had a little bit more attention, right? Meaning that there was an intentional effort to not just identify, but also to express the unique nuances of fatherhood. I think a large part of that comes from twofold, right? One, I think maybe a lack of father's vulnerability, in the sense that maybe the pastor is not adequately aware of the struggles, because us as men don't do our due diligence of seeking assistance, getting aid, getting the support we need.
Sure.
The other side of this conversation is when we do open up in those spaces, right, and we do have those conversations, sometimes there is this intentional selection to not identify some of these things, maybe out of concern that it will look like things are not going the way they should. But I can say as a young father, I thoroughly appreciate when pastors take the time from the pulpit to be able to address the issues and the concerns. And then on top of that, Rick, to do it in a tangible and a relatable way to all generations. And I'll pass it to my father on this note, that I think that there is so much to be said about fatherhood that for me is helpful wisdom, but it's 20 years down the line, which is wonderful. I'm not against it. But, and it may be because, once again, the demographic of the person who's preaching. But I think that if someone would be able to adequately address what are the concerns of a 30-year-old father compared to a 40-year-old father, compared to a 50-year-old, I mean, really map this journey out. I think that would be beneficial. So
fantastic.
hopefully that helps.
Good. Any thoughts or additions there, George?
I would agree with what Jordan said on that note there. I think what it'd be helpful too, they don't speak about it a lot. They don't have a lot of sermons on it, but I think if they would come together maybe in smaller group settings, like a smaller ministry, men's ministry, where we can elaborate, open up on different discussions about different things in life, and I think it would help the men as well.
That's it. There you just plugged the faithful fathering. Faithful fathering is a leg of the men's ministry. That's that's the way we work. That's wonderful. And that's, you talk about the different seasons of fathering. That's something that I've always tried to emphasize as well, because we. Not only addressing the fathers at the different ages, but understanding that we're moving through different seasons as well. I know, George, you and I both, we've had to let go.
So true.
And we have to wait for that phone to ring before we get to give advice, right? But Jordan's at the age where he just has to be matter of fact in the way he's raising that boy and his daughter, and then in between you got the coach season that says, okay, you're going to make you're going to stumble, you're going to fall, you're going to fail, you're going to succeed, and we're going to work through all that. But that's exciting times. Now, back to the church, is there? Have you seen, just in different churches that you've been in, maybe the church you attend now, is there an environment that projects a healthy imaging? I find, the church is under a lot of scrutiny for being so feminized. And I'm not saying that we have to have man caves in every quarter of the church, but is there a healthy projection of what fatherhood and family? Are there pictures on the walls? Is there conversation? Or is there an initiative to project a healthy image of fathering?
You can take that one.
I think we don't have enough. It would be very helpful, as you said, is pictures on the wall. I think when you bring that and put that on the wall, it opens up for conversations. And I think it would also be invited to people that comes in, especially men that come in with their families, and it would be open, so it won't be so it would be more at ease when they come in they say, okay, I see families up here on the wall. Let me interact with other guys, other men. You know, they feel more comfortable.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree to that 100%. I think that there's a lot of things that can be done. I think even with a lot of churches now moving to the digital space, right, and the content that people produce, whether it be the announcement section that's showed in front of a church, many times it's not men that's doing those announcements, right? When it comes to who do you meet for first-time visitors, or if you want to join the church, who do you talk to, right? I think that can be very helpful, especially when you're dealing with people of all, they say, levels of depth in the context of their walk with the Lord, right? So sometimes people might feel intimidated, so to speak, to go in to pray with their pastor or who's ever these ministry leaders, that they get kind of shy away from that moment, right? But suppose, Faithful Fathering or any other, organization or group of men related to that church was able to just jump right in and say, hey, talking to the pastor can feel too much.
Right.
Man, let's have some coffee.
Right.
Let's sit down, right? And I think that's where the atmosphere, the photos, and just the environment can contribute to healthy conversations.
Right. That sensitivity to spiritual maturity is always
critical.
A key point, right? So you don't, very good. How about easy to plug into activities for dads and kids to give moms a day off here and there, right? Have you had those situations at churches you've been a part of?
I can speak from the perspective of someone who was in ministry and is pretty familiar with a lot of ministries. I would say more often than not, no. And that's what's unfortunate, right? Because, of course, moms need a break. They work tremendously hard, tirelessly to help make sure the home is going the right direction from the context of emotional security, which is also an important part of fatherhood, by the way. But God giving them that unique role there. But I'd say this too, to add to that, Rick. I think that's by design. I think sometimes when it comes to fathers, maybe a lot of ministries don't actually know what fathers need. And like I said, it goes back to what I mentioned earlier with those two dynamics. I think that if men are more vocal and we say, hey, listen, this is what we need, right? Like we need a day to, and I don't want to just lean into the cliches, right? Of just doing stuff with the car, which is important, right? But even the vulnerable aspects of it. Hey, is there a men's group where we can confess sin to each other, James 5, right? Where does that take place? And for the church I know we attend right now, there's a wonderful opportunity through our life application groups, which is, once again, commingle between men and women. But those conversations ultimately can be the seed for greater fellowship, greater intimate conversations to be able to commence between men, right? Because if I hear what Rick's going through and I'm dealing with the same thing, then maybe the Spirit will put it on my heart to talk to Rick after this concludes, and then we can continue the conversation further.
Sure. And how about yourself, George? Any experience with trying to set up things where dads and kids could just have a fun day or a fun morning? Or
I think Jordan came up with a good program. It's called Team Titus.
Yes, Team Titus.
And it's wonderful.
Ah, fantastic.
As well as with the girls. I know his father's with the sons, but we also have the girls. His wife runs that program with the girls, and she relates to the teenagers. And she helped them and showed them how to be a young lady.
Fantastic.
And he actually has some other guys that were part with him. They show the young boys how to become men, how to do manly things.
Yes.
How to change flats on cars, how to change batteries.
Right.
Because a lot of the young men that's in these programs, in the program that he has on, they really don't have a father.
Right.
So he's a father from the fatherless.
Right.
So he steps up and he got other guys involved with him. And I think it's very important to show the young guys right there that they are loved too.
Absolutely.
And to bring them in the circle and to let them know this is how you do this at this time.
Sure.
Other than seeing worldly things, this is Christ-centered.
Right.
So I think if we would do more of that, you would get a better participation with the kids, the ones that are out of pocket right now.
Right.
Yeah, I would agree, and leave it up to my dad to always highlight. He brought it up, so I'll say this much about it, Rick, and I think you'll love this. The program he's referring to, Team Titus, was a program designed to get fathers and male figures to do two things for young men. Number one, give them a practical skill that they'll be able to put in their mental cache to one day draw back on. The example he gave, to change a tire, to change oil, to jump a car, and also give them a spiritual bubble of accountability where there's two-way communication between a man, particularly the father, and also a young man.
Sure.
And giving those two things is what we did over at the church that we're part of. But, I didn't want to have a plug.
Plugs are okay. And Dad has every right to plug you. So there you go.
I'm grateful for him. Grateful for him.
Now, what I always do when we do those, we've done similar deals, and that's really something we encourage. Is even girls need to have change flats, just in case they're on their own, But the challenge is to and always incorporate some kind of spiritual leadership piece in that too. When you're having a fun activity, whether it's just pure fun like a dodgeball game or a baseball game, kickball game, or whether there's some life application exercises, that one-on-one time with a man or with your dad or a spiritual mentor gives you a chance to tie that into some spiritual leadership as well. So that's always a challenge for dads a lot of times. I think when we talk about the 3 tenets of faithful fathering, we'll hit in a little bit, but you can prioritize physical presence, you can engage emotionally, but that spiritual leadership part is usually challenging for a lot of dads to really step into that. But and along those lines, how about any dad-specific studies that have been done in churches that you've been affiliated with? Have there been any something that would specifically encourage a dad to talk about his heritage, to understand heritage, to walk in the full armor of God, those types of things? Has there been anything along those lines?
No, I think that's rare. I mean, typically what I've seen is there are studies on purity, right? And as you know, purity doesn't just stop when you get married. Some of the younger men think that marriage, once you put the ring on it, like all of a sudden lust is now in the picture, but that's once again not the case. So I would just generally say no, but I could see how something like that would be incredibly helpful and beneficial.
Hey, George, anything on your...
I would say the same as he said. We don't have anything set up for that as a present, but that would be a great opportunity in the future to do something like that.
Okay. How about just generally encouraging and equipping dads? Is there anything out there that has been I'm not saying that you have cheerleaders running around pom-pom saying "Go Dads." I'm just saying that our dads. Do they feel encouraged, or even men like a challenge, don't they? Are they challenged by coming to church? Are they challenged to be the man, the husband, and father they're called to be?
Well, I would say that depends on the Sunday, right? Because from the pulpit context, the message should be able to reach everybody in the home, right? Which, of course, would incorporate fathers. I think from a strategic standpoint, right? If you're talking about planning, curriculum, that's where, to me, the biggest deficit is. So I would say generally, no, I haven't seen a church really lean into that. And maybe it's because they don't see it as vital or as urgent. Not that they don't see it as important, right? And I just kind of divorce those two things because there are moments where they do recognize, right? Like Father's Day and Father's Month, as we would describe it here. But that's convenient, right? Everybody does it then. But I think throughout the year, I've heard messages that are heavily tailored to fathers. But like I said, again, that's not the norm. That's more the few and far between, but it does occur.
Anything to add there, George? Anything?
In a small group setting, like over at the church we are members of, they have the men's ministry. And so we try to encourage one another, lift them up.
Fantastic. Yeah, that's good. That's good. And it sounds like there has been some mentoring that's always a key piece. Mentoring is kind of an overused word a lot of times. People, I just call it discipling. That was actually going to be the name of the ministry at one juncture, was Discipling Dads, and I ended up going with Faithful Fathers. So discipling is our dad's number one job, of course, in the home, is what have you. How about community outreach as, say, dads and kids? Are there any initiatives to really engage kids and do a service project in the community as a family or as father and children?
I'm glad you asked that. So I can testify to this and say the church that we're at, we have a wonderful outreach center that does a tremendous amount of work in the Acres Home community. So what this looks like is providing food. At one point in time, we had drug rehabilitation courses. We had ESL courses, anger management courses, all of which we were inviting not just the community fathers, right, but also incorporating the fathers that are members of the church to be able to show up and to show out and to be present in food delivery. So what this would look like is cars would line up, and this was really big during COVID. In fact, we had, pictures and videos of this. It's documented with lines all around the corner, right near TC Jester. And what ended up happening was people came to Christ, big picture, as a result of the charity and the heartbeat of the church. That's still going on. That has not ceased. That has not stopped. But I will say that is what thoroughly impressed me about the body that we're part of. Now, I'm sure that we're not the only one in the Houston area that has a heart for people within the community. So I'd venture to say that there are many other churches that also pick up that mantle to be a difference maker in the community. I think what we could grow, though, just to be transparent here, is to consider what are we doing intentionally to coordinate with other churches in this effort to present a united front. And I think sometimes there's this tendency for churches, even in the incorporation of fathers, to say, this is what my church is doing. Okay, this is what your church is doing, rather than saying, who else is in this general area that we could partner with?
The body,
the big C church, right, as you described it, right, to bring us all together. So that's what I would like to see done personally. But I think we, so far, have done a pretty solid job.
And George, as when your kids were growing up, was there anything you did to encourage them to get involved in the community as well?
Oh, yeah. Yes, when they was growing up, we always went out to different, during the summertime for sure, the church had like programs that they would be a part of. You know, it was also, it was a lot of fun for them as well, but it also was being taught the word at the same time.
Well, if you had a word to the churches out there on what things they might want to focus on this Father's Day month, George, what would be your encouragement to churches out there as far as firing dads up and giving them some encouragement and even some equipping to get on the right track? Do you have any words of encouragement for churches?
Yeah, I would say to the churches that's out there to just open up with open arms. You know, give them love. You know, tell them that God loved them. We also love them as well, especially the ones that may not be connected with the churches and may just be coming out to visit church. Just let them know we love them. The church is open. God's love them as well, and, we're here for them.
Okay. How about yourself, Jordan? Any encouragement?
Yeah, I would say, to kind of echo on what my father said, but I'll put a younger spin on it here, to get intergenerational connections fluid. And what that means is if the older dads can connect with the younger dads and to really begin to build bridges, but understanding this, the younger needs the older for wisdom because they have the experience. But in the case of when Paul's writing to Timothy in 1 Timothy chapter 4, where he says, let no one look down on your youthfulness, right? But instead be an example to all those who believe in speech, love, faith, conduct, and purity. There are things that the younger generation, I think, could also impart to the older generation. And I don't think a lot of churches understand how big of a divide it's brewing. And I wish that they would put their hands around both the old and the young and say, y'all got to wear the same T-shirt of fatherhood here, okay? We got to figure this thing out.
Amen. Amen. Yeah, where you may be looking to us for wisdom, we're looking for you for energy.
There you go. Say that.
There you go. As long as we're working together, that's fine.
Well, dads, there you go. In your church, look for opportunities to raise the bar for fathering. That's what Faithful Fathering is all about, to encourage and equip dads. We're not bashing dads, and we're not bashing churches here. We all do what we have to do to survive, but we want to do more than survive. We want to thrive as men, as husbands, as fathers, that we would raise a godly generation as we're charged to do in Malachi 2:15. So take the lessons from George and Jordan and do some action. Take some action in your church. Feel free to reach out to Faithful Fathering. We'll give you any advice and resources that we have available to encourage you on your journey as a dad. So step into this Father's Day month with all that energy, clarity, and discernment that you need to be the dad the next generation needs. God bless. Godspeed.